All right, here we go. We're picking up where we left off, where we created an API server for the New York Times React Express starter project, where we could refer to routes if this thing is running. We can get data from the Mongoose database, and that's all. We have no front end. So it's really early in our process, but nonetheless, we're actually going to try to go through the steps of deploying it because that'll take us through the process of building a production build and just making sure early that we have this deployment process down, that there's no hiccups that are going to be unexpected. So one of the things we'll do, and remember I have two terminals open, one that's running the server, one where I can check for commands, like for example the commit level that I'm at, the commit hash is like this is where I'm at, and if I make any changes I can do a git diff and see those changes. So let's just make sure that we're in the right environment. I do this kind of compulsively. I make a change and I make a prediction that I'm going to see that change there, and if I don't, then I get really worried. So I see that we can have changes automatically reflected because at dev time, the bundler tool called Webpack is sitting there resolving all of our imports. So remember, all of these import statements, they don't work inside of browsers. So the goal of Webpack, while it's running and when we create a production build, is to take all of these files. In fact, I know that I could look for app header in this bundle.js and I would find it somewhere in there because basically everything has been put into this bundle.js, including some styles and stuff. So we see that it's quite large actually, and this is one of the things that our bundle process, when we create a production build, it's gonna shrink that. So this is 346 kilobytes compressed and gzipped, and 1.4 megabytes in total. So that's a lot. So let's make our work in progress commit, because we do have a diff now. It's very small, but we're just going to use our gwhip alias from before, and that secures our progress. Remember, when we push to Heroku, which we don't have an app for this yet, but when we push to Heroku, that it's only committed files that are getting pushed, right? Git can't push something that it hasn't been committed. So make sure that everything that needs to go to Heroku has been committed. All right, now what was that file or command needed to create a production build? That's yarn build. And where's it gonna go? Well, let's take a look over here under client. This is where the built files are gonna go. And then let's run a yarn build. You can run it while your server is running. And it creates an optimized production build. And it does some things called fingerprinting, which allow better caching behavior. And so we see that after building, we got 35 kilobytes. That's a 10% the size of before, and then only 288 bytes of CSS. That's really, really efficient. Another thing is that if we're going to be deploying it to a subfolder, we're going to want to set the home page field in package.json, but that doesn't really apply to us. So now all of the Mongoose connection stuff is at this point set up in the server file, and if we did it correctly, we can be overridden by something in the process environment, and that's how Heroku is going to give us a URL. But when we're running locally, if we haven't specified a MongoDB URI, it will simply be this localhost React. So what we could just do to test this out before deploying it is if we don't have a serve command and I do have a serve command. This is just an npm module that lets you serve a static site very easily. So if you don't have it, you'll have to add this. This is like npm install-g, but it's the yarn version. And once we have it, we can actually go to the client folder and then serve -static the build folder. Oh, that's funny. Let me see. I think this is going to be different on people's machines. Serve-static client build. That should work. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. So this is node end local 8.9.0. Silly things. You really could just at this point gone and done this, but I'm being stubborn. All right, so thankfully it's going to open up on a different port, 5000. I hold the command button so that I can click through and open that up. And then here is our site. Taking a look at the network behavior, we have a much smaller size. In fact, it's loaded once and then it's cached by a thing called service worker. This is something we haven't gotten into. Truthfully, I'm still getting into it. But we saw the size on disk. We know there's a size improvement. And in fact, with the service worker information, this actually tells us that we even have a little bit of offline support, but we're not going to get into that. But we are going to test our API. And if we expose the route correctly, API saved and the whole proxy thing shouldn't be an issue anymore, but apparently it is. Not exactly sure. I mean, this wouldn't prove anything if I went 3001 API saved, because what I really want to know is, can this site connect to its back end? And I'm not sure right now that it can. All right, well, at this point, I wanted to verify that this thing could talk to the back end at API saved, and I'm a little concerned that it can't, because in Heroku, it's going to need to do, can't use proxies and port magic. It has to be able to talk to itself at API saved. So not really sure what I've proven by this, except that I have, certainly done a build. So I'm going to cross my fingers and do a Heroku create for this project, and it should do some fun stuff like make a cryptic reef thing and give me a Git URL. And so I probably see in my remotes a cryptic reef URL, so I should be able to git push Heroku master. Now, I don't have an MLab database set up, so at this point I'll just be verifying that static files are working just like on localhost 5000, and I've no real reason to doubt that. But before I do this git push, let's look at git status. And now it sees that client build has been produced. Let's remind ourselves what's in there. And the static content for JS is under there. And we need all those files to go to Heroku. So we do need to do a git add of client build and a git commit with a message that says built files for prod. If I didn't do this, you'd get a nasty Heroku error. I've seen it before. So now our git logs actually show, in addition to our work in progress commit that changed the title to New York Times React App, then we have our built files for production. And I'm going to take this URL and pop it up in the browser just so that when we reload, when we push this, we want to see this title bar be the same as that. So we know exactly what we are going for. Is this title bar is going to be the same when we refresh. So I've set that up. Now it should be as easy as git push Heroku master. And of course, all of the node stuff has to be done. It doesn't need to be node 8, but I'm using a tool that lets me manage multiple node versions, and you probably saw it used briefly. It's called node-env. It was the one where I said node-env local 8.9.0, and it put in a file called .node version. So when I deployed that, Heroku was listening to that. It would work on node version 6 as well. All right, now while we have pushed that and got our logs, we should just refresh this. And in fact, we have deployed all of our static files here. Now, I don't know if this is going to work because I haven't even set up a MongoDB URI, so there's like no way it could work. But maybe we'll get an error in Heroku logs. That's funny. Heroku logs usually shows me log files. Heroku help logs. One of the most useful commands is -t to tail them. So Heroku logs -t as I make requests. Okay, so here we see the get and all of the files that it got. Let's actually clear that out, and let's do a reload here. And here we see the requests coming in. So that's pretty neat. So database stuff has to be done in another video, but that is our static file and our build process. Thanks for watching.